Hi guys, and welcome to a new time-lapse. This one features another troll and was made as a combination of a drawing and a painting. Trolls in folklore were not always enormous ugly beasts as depicted in John Bauer's illustrations, but oftentimes beautiful and very human-like creatures. They sometimes looked almost exactly like anyone else, but with a tail hidden in clothes, extra large noses or ears, or very big hands and feet. I like to enlarge the nose or ears in these kind of portraits, where you can only see the head. I started the artwork by creating a small rough sketch about size A5. I then photographed it and opened it up in my computer, where I enlarged it and printed it out on an A4 paper. Then I transferred it with a light board onto a blank piece of paper with a pencil, where I spent more time with correcting the face and drawing in the individual larger leaves of the ferns. I waited with the small details. After I was done, I scanned the A4 drawing, enlarged it again to size A3 and printed out the result on two different pieces of A4 paper, which I then taped together. Then it was time to transfer the big sketch, again with a light board, to the fancy expensive watercolor paper, which measures 31 by 41 centimeters, or 12 by 16 inches. I had already used washi tape to protect the borders, which I wanted to keep white and clean. When the transferring was complete, I lightened the pencil strokes with a kneaded eraser and then started with the meticulous work of drawing all the tiny details of the ferns with a micron fineliner. This part took hours and hours and was the second most time-consuming part of the artwork. I absolutely love drawing details. I never get bored of it. Instead, I find it very relaxing and therapeutic. It reduces stress and makes me happy. When the line work was done, I erased all traces of pencil on the paper and used more washi tape to attach the paper to the table, so it would be kept stretched for the washes of watercolor. As you can see, I started with a hair, and I hadn't realized it would be so difficult painting the hair behind and engulfed in fern, so I started to hesitate about the planned hairdo, which was a little bit inspired by the Rococo. I wanted something high with volume. I kept adding washes, even though I wasn't sure about what I needed to change. That's how I most often work. I have ideas which during the work get altered to better fit the piece of art. Sometimes I have to limit myself because the pieces would take way too long to finish. I work on my art in my spare time, since I have a regular day job. That means I don't have the time or energy to spend more than a couple of hours a day with art, and a little more on the weekend. When the foundation of the hair was done, I started with the face. I worked wet in wet, since I wanted a rather smooth finish, but still get some uneven texture that would look a tiny bit dirty. This is a rather young troll who likes to play in the forest and marshes. She spends time outside every day and gets a lot of sun on her skin during summer. When the time came to paint the ferns, I still wasn't sure about what I would do with the background. I had a vague idea about painting light washes of watercolor behind the ferns, but I didn't really look forward to it because I knew it would take ages before I was finished. I don't have the exact same control of tiny brushes as with pencils. I kept painting the fern details and time was just flying by. I used several pre-mixed shades and tints of green to give the foliage some volume and depth. I have always loved ferns since I was a small girl. We had ferns behind the house that my father and grandfather built, where I spent the first 5 years of my life. We lived in the countryside in Blekinge, in the south of Sweden. I remember ferns, gooseberry bushes and low stone walls in the surroundings, as well as a lot of trees, since we lived right beside a forest. Sometimes I really long to live near a forest again. It's quite a difference from living in a big city like Stockholm. I love nature, and that's why I'm trying to incorporate it in my art. In my earlier work, I oftentimes focused on just the subject, which meant a person or an animal. Sometimes I drew a kind of forest spirit from folklore, called rådare, which I cannot find any translation for. They were the guardians of the forests, mountains and lakes. I drew them as humans, with tree branches growing out of their heads. There is no occurrences of that in Nordic folklore that I know of, but there are some mentions of so-called bergatroll, or mountain trolls, that had trees growing on them. I started to think about painting a dark wash for the background, and tried it on one place between the leaves, but I was right about the paintbrush being too hard to control. It simply took too much time and effort, and it wouldn't look exactly as I wanted. So I changed my mind and thought about that wonderful Micron fineliner. I knew black would really emphasize the ferns and face, so I decided to go with my instincts. This meant I could stop painting all the details of the ferns, except for where the ferns overlapped or where they touched the hair and the troll's body. The rest I just kind of blotched in all over, as you can see. And this greatly reduced the time-consuming task. I thought the fineliner would take less time than watercolor, and maybe I was right, but it took a long time. I have cut away a lot of the footage from the background drawing. From the beginning, this video was actually 22 minutes long. Together with a Micron pen, I used the Tombow Fudenosuke brush pen to quicker color in the larger white areas. It helped a bit at least. And this, the blackening of the background, was obviously the most time-consuming part of the artwork. Many hours of drawing. But again, this is something I really enjoy doing, so even if it was hard work, and even if my hand cramped up a bit every now and then, I loved it. And seeing it in a time-lapse is, for me, very satisfying. By the way, if you saw and listened to my first video, you might remember that I planned on posting a video every other week. That plan quickly fell apart, since this piece took at least 20 hours to complete, not to mention how many hours I spent with the video editing and voiceover. I made several videos, trying out different speed, cutting out more and more clips to make it shorter. I don't want the videos to be too long. We all have things to do and other YouTube channels to follow as well. Even if I love to spend hours watching artist time-lapses and listening to them talk, I know that most people have busy schedules and a life away from YouTube to manage. I want my channel to be a relaxing break, not something that eats away too big chunks of your day. Anyway, I decided to not have an exact posting schedule like every other Friday, at least not right now. Instead, I will aim for 1 or 2 videos a month and post them on different weekdays depending on what feels right. The blackening took several days to finish, and I had to go shopping for more Micron pens in the middle of everything. I think I went through at least 5 or 6 fineliners for this artwork, maybe more. This part of the drawing felt a little bit like doodling, which is something I highly recommend if you are stressed. Taking 15 minutes just to doodle on a paper or in a sketchbook is a bit like meditation for me. I like to doodle a bit every now and then in my bullet journal or on a scrap piece of paper. Sometimes I keep it simplistic, sometimes I go extravagant and spend hours with illustrations. From time to time, it even evolves into what I consider to be a finished piece of art. When the last corner of the ferns was done, I realized the balance of the portrait was a bit off and decided to alter it a bit. I cut the troll's upper body, making her more of a bust, like a sculpture. I filled it in with black and then started shading with lots and lots of dots. I'm really impressed of artists who create big amazing pieces with stippling, as it's called. I have tried to make drawings just with stippling, and it's actually harder than it looks. So kudos to you who managed to spend hours and hours making dots into fantastic artwork. Really impressive. I still wasn't sure about how I wanted to emphasize the shadows in the face and just started a bit with the dot work there as well. But I quickly changed to color pencils, since I wanted a more smooth, refined texture of the skin. I went on with layers over layers, gradually building up a color and shade that I was pleased with. The color pencils I used are Faber-Castell Polychromos. I thought the ears were a bit too dark and needed more depth, so I lightened them in certain areas. For the skin, I used several different shades of pink, brown and red, as well as some Payne's grey for the shadows. Then it was time to work more on the hair. I started drawing lines with a watercolor pencil from Derwent Inktense, placing the lines where I wanted more color and darker shades. After I was done, I went over all the lines with a paintbrush dipped in clean water. This activates the Inktense, making it smoother and darker. I drew in individual hairs in the eyebrows, again with a Polychromos color pencil, then started defining the shading around the eyes even more, finishing with the eyelashes, which is one of my favorite parts of all paintings and drawings. I just love long eyelashes, and I oftentimes give them to animals as well as humans. I don't feel a drawing or painting is complete without eyelashes, even though I've tried it a few times. I darkened the shadow on the neck, shoulders and chest with Payne's grey and then wrote my signature, even though I knew the piece wasn't finished. I realized the hair wasn't done yet, and I wanted something more opaque than just watercolor, so I shifted to gouache. I mixed the red with a reddish brown, and it gave me a tint I was pleased with. I wanted her hair to be a bit darker, with more defined strands of hair and more depth. This was actually my first time using gouache. I bought a set years ago, and it has just been lying in a drawer since then. So I'm glad they finally got some attention, and I really liked using them. I will definitely incorporate them on a more regular basis in my watercolor paintings, and maybe try to use them on their own someday. You might have noticed the red line right beside one eyebrow. That was an accident that I thankfully was able to erase very quickly with a wet piece of paper towel followed by a dry one. I must admit, I kind of panicked a bit there. Then I added some highlights to the eyes and lips, followed by darker eyebrows, all with gouache. The removing of the washi tape was so satisfying. This painting is for sale in my Etsy store, and I will leave a link in the description below, together with a list of the materials I used for this artwork. Please like, comment and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more time lapses in the future. Take care, and I hope to see you soon.